Hello everyone, I'm Zhang from Beihang University. I record this video representation to introduce our work described in paper Question Type and Answer Related Keywords Aware Question Generation. Question generation is the reverse type of question answering. Question answering is to answer a question given a context, while question generation is to construct a question given a context and a specified phrase or token as the answer. Most of the previous work on question generation are implemented in the sequence-to-sequence framework, which is originally proposed for neural machine translation. In this framework, the answer and its context are mapped into the continuous space through Boolean embedding, and then fed into an encoder to get their total representation in form of a fixed size vector, which is further fed into an autoregressive decoder to generate the question word by word. As the length of the context input is variable, the fixed size vector forms an information bottleneck between the input and output in practice. So, attention mechanism is then proposed to dynamically collect information from the context. It calculates the attention weight of input hidden state with respect to the output hidden states on each time step. And the attention with some input hidden state is then concatenated with the corresponding output hidden state before predicting the generation distribution. To put emphasis on the specified answer, the position of the answer in the context is denoted by BIO labels, which is short for begin, inside, and outside. As some of the words in the context can also be used to form the question. Copy mechanism is proposed to directly select words from the context as part of the prediction. In practice, the copy mechanism tends to copy those words that are duplicated in the context instead of those real but co-occurrent words. So it is further equipped with a max-out pointer network to only keep the max score of copy for duplicated words. To further aggregate information from the whole context, a gated self-attention layer is added to the output of encoder so as to refine the context and answer representation at every time step. So far, the sequence-to-sequence framework is equipped with a series of complex mechanisms, and this baseline is named as MPGSA. As the previous framework is so complex in structure and brings difficulties in training the whole pipeline, here we simply consider another way for question generation through the generative pre-training model. It takes the context and answer as input, and then generates a question word by word. However, both the sequence-to-sequence framework and the end-to-end GPT-2 are only trained by sparse question-answer pairs in the dataset, which leads to such existing problems. One is the lack of semantic diversity in generation results, which is also named as generic response, because the answer and its context are usually paired with one question in the dataset. The other is the lack of distinction between different aspects in generation mechanism, as the datasets only describe what a feasible question and answer can have, but not how to compose a question. As we can see, the same answer and its context can be asked in plenty of different ways, which is not depicted in the original question-to-answer pairs. On the other hand, the generated question is composed of frameworks such as special question words, prepositions, punctuations, and pronouns. and content words such as rank, quantifier, and adjectives, and the named entities, which depends on different aspects but are treated in the same black box. To deal with those existing problems, we propose two kinds of external information. One is the answer-related keywords information, and the other is question type information. The keyword information is represented by those words in the context that are linked to the specified answer. In other words, they are the clue words to the answer. The question type information is represented by the question type distribution of feasible questions to the answer, which defines the possible ways of asking about the answer. In such way, the training goal of the whole system just transforms from only the language modeling to the joint likelihood of language modeling the question type and the keywords given the answer and its context. And this modification makes the generation procedure much more explicit. Particularly, we adopt two submodels to predict the question type and the keyword information, which are both based on the sequential representation of the answer and its context. The question type submodel predicts the conditional distribution of 8 question types through an 8-way classification layer over the representation of CLS token, while the keyword submodel predicts which words are keywords in a context related to the answer through binary classification on representation of each context tokens. Equipped with those external information, the main model for question generation tends to have more information in the input. The keywords information is input as a subsequence after the context, while the question type information is input as the first token before the question. As external information is not defined in the original dataset, so it needs annotation before training the system. For the answer-related keywords, we firstly filter which words in the question are represented through TF-IDF and stop words. Then we add representative n-grams and real words that appear in the question with accordance to the globe vocabulary. Finally, we annotate the context words as keywords if they match one of those keywords in the question. And the matching degree is calculated through lemmatization, edit distance, and globe cosine similarity. To annotate the question type information, we firstly classify all the questions into 8 types. And among them, what type questions take the largest proportion, while Y type question is the fewest. And then we classify the given question into those types through specific regular expressions. Here is our experimental study. We compare our proposed framework with previous methods, including vanilla sequence-to-sequence model, sequence-to-sequence variants, and GPT-2. Meanwhile, we also conduct ablation study to evaluate the effectiveness of the external information. It can be found that GPT-2 equipped with the keyword and question type information outperformed all the baseline models, while it can be further improved with annotated question type information as input. Those results just demonstrate the effectiveness of external information to question generation. Well, there still remains a gap between the external information from the submodels and that from annotations. We further take experiment to analyze the performance of submodels for keyword and question type respectively. We compare the question type precision of question generated by GPT-2 base and that predicted by question type submodel. And it can be inferred from the results that the question type submodel can better direct the generation process. We also analyze the performance of keyword submodel. It can be found that there still remains a gap between the external information quality from those submodels and that from annotations. So the system can be further improved with a better mechanism to predict those external information. One of the major purposes of our proposal is to realize controllable generation under specified conditions. Here we evaluate this through generating questions with the same answer and different external information. The results of a case study are illustrated in these tables, and it can be found that the main model has the ability to satisfy different conditions and correspondingly generate diverse questions, such as generate questions that satisfy different question type and satisfy different keywords. In other words, our framework just makes the generation procedure more transparent. In summary, our proposed framework makes a solid improvement on the basis of strong baseline model, gives a clear reasoning view of question generation, and thus provides appropriate alternatives for controllable diversity enhancement. Our work can be further expanded in those directions. Firstly, the accuracy of submodels for keyword and question type prediction remains a large space for improvement. Secondly, there are many other kinds of external information that are worth further study, such as knowledge graph. And lastly, it can be an interesting direction to explore the effect of ambiguous words in this system, as the ambiguous words is one of the major problems that have to be dealt with in the question answering system, and question generation is the reverse task of question answering and can be used as a way of data augmentation for question answering. That's all, and thanks for your listening.